Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
September 19th, 1998. The barbecue was well underway. The food cooked and the beer was flowing. For those that could drink, parked up in the dunes were a dozen or more motorbikes. It was the annual event for the bike club to end the season. Not so much a club, more a group of friends with a love of bikes. The lifeguards had left the beach and the tide was in driving the group to the edge of the dunes. Jeff, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a full beard and in his mid-40s, noticed her first. He knew something was odd when she turned up on the beach. Her long denim skirt, thick sweater, and long overcoat would have been less out of place on a cold winter night. On this unseasonably balmy early autumn evening, with people still walking around in swimsuits, she stood out like a sore thumb. Jeff walked over to her and invited her to join them. As she looked up at him, he recognized something. The unkempt hair, the sunken eyes that looked as though they hadn't slept in days. All of this reminded him of something he'd seen before in the none-too-distant past. She turned down the invitation and moved further down the beach. As Jeff went back to his friends, he got some ribbing from them. Lenny was especially vocal as he put his arm around his friend's shoulders. "Come on now, Jeff. You're not so desperate you have to try to pick up a bag lady." "She's no bag lady, Lenny. She may look a mess, but those clothes are expensive. I don't know what the problem is, but she looks very troubled." A prime example of the changes in the biking community, Lenny was 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered with a shaved head. By day, he was known as Leonard Wiltshire and wore a pinstriped suit. Not that he liked it, but a stockbroker's clients expected a sober dress code. Evenings and weekends, he was out on the bike, dressed in his leathers and a bandana covering his shaved head. When it wasn't covered by a helmet, he was a smooth operator and looked after Jeff's investments. Jeff was more than just a client, though. He was a friend and a fellow biker. "She's not your problem. Now come on back to the party. I'm sure we can fix you up with some female company." As the beach party continued, Jeff kept an eye on the woman down the beach. He had no problem finding girls to dance with and even some mild snogging. Even so, the vagrant woman still occupied his mind. As darkness fell, the party broke up. They gathered up the rubbish and dropped it in the back of Jeff's pickup truck. One by one, the bikes started up and disappeared into the night. As soon as the last person left, he made his way through the dunes to where the woman sat on the sand. She appeared to be waiting for something or someone. The surf crashed on the beach and showed up white in the moonlight. As the tide retreated, she got up and started walking towards the water. She reached the water's edge and continued to walk straight ahead. This is what Jeff had been afraid of. When he first saw her face, he knew where he'd seen the look before. 2 years before, he'd caught sight of himself in a mirror and seen that very same look. As she walked into the water, he knew what he had to do. Running down the beach towards her, Jeff knew what she was going to do, and he'd be damned if he'd let it happen. He tore his clothes off as he ran towards her. The water was over her knees, soaking the heavy denim skirt. As Jeff reached the water's edge, he called out to her, but if she heard him, she took no notice. As the waves started to crash on her thighs, Jeff dived into the water and swam towards her. The coat and skirt were soaked and hung heavily on her. She was about to throw herself forward into the retreating tide when Jeff stood up behind her and grabbed her around the waist. Startled by his sudden appearance, the woman started to scream while struggling to break free. Jeff shouted to make himself heard above the sound of the waves crashing to the shore. "I'm sorry, I can't let you do this. Leave me alone. I want to die." The woman screamed back at him. "If we go out any further, the tide will catch us and we'll both drown. Is that what you want?" He turned her round to face him. "Let me go. I don't want to live anymore. If you go out there, I'll have to try and rescue you. I'm not a good swimmer, and with this tide running, we'll probably both die. Please, save my life and come out of the water." Her hands came up to her mouth as she looked straight into his eyes and felt the tears roll down her cheeks, and a succession of deep sobs forced their way from her stomach. Jeff put his arms around her and hugged her to his chest as they stood there in the surf. For several minutes, they battled against the waves to stay upright. Then Jeff led her back to the dry sand. As they made their way back up towards the dunes, he picked up the clothes he'd scattered across the beach. He knew he couldn't leave her. He had to get her away from the beach. He lifted the sodden coat from her shoulders. "I think this coat is ruined. The skirt may be salvageable, but the sweater has probably had it. Either way, you'd better get out of them. If the wind gets up, you'll be frozen. Here, put on my jeans and sweatshirt. I've got a jacket in the pickup. I can wear that in my swimming costume." They looked at each other for a few seconds, and the woman reached to unfasten her skirt. She looked at Jeff expectantly. "Well, go on then. Turn around." Jeff apologized and turned his back on her, hoping that she wouldn't make a break for it and return to the sea. "It's all right, you can look now." He He turned around and immediately burst out laughing. The jeans came down over her feet, and she had to hold on to the waistband to stop them falling down. The sleeves of his sweatshirt covered her hands. "I'm sorry for laughing, but that really is an outfit that fits only where it touches. Stand still and I'll roll the legs up. There's some rope in the pickup we can use as a belt." He knelt before her and rolled up the legs of the jeans until she was no longer standing on them. When he got up, he smiled at her. "Now you've managed to work your way into my jeans. I think I deserve to know your name." "It's Helen McAllister." "Well, Helen McAllister, my name's Jeff Cockburn and I'm pleased to meet you. Now let's find you a belt and get off this beach before it gets cold." They walked to the pickup. Jeff found the rope, threaded it through the jeans, and pulled it tight to her waist. They got into the truck, and Jeff turned it around. "Jeff, why are you doing this?" "Because I want to and because I owe someone." He would have said more, but suddenly in the moonlight he saw something. A woman, tall, athletic, wearing a white one-piece swimsuit. She reached up and pushed her long dark hair back from her face as she strode out of the surf. He reached out, putting his hand on Helen's leg and shaking it. "Do you see that?" He pointed in the direction of the woman. "See what?" "I can only see the waves and the sand." Jeff looked again. There was nothing there, and certainly no one. He sat quiet for a moment, shaking his head. "Jeff, are you all right?" "I'm fine," he said as he snapped himself back to reality. "Now I'm willing to bet you've not eaten in a while. Since you wouldn't eat any of our burgers or sausages, I'm going to treat you to the best fish and chips in the whole of Cornwall." Jeff set off on the road to Padstow. He looked across at Helen from time to time, trying to gauge her state of mind. He hoped he was doing the right thing. Showing her kindness, caring for her must do something, he thought. She'd shown no interest in what they were doing and just let it happen. It was as if nothing could make things any worse. "What do you mean, you owe someone?" "Someone did something for me a while ago. I can't pay them back, so I'm paying it forward. I can't really tell you while I'm driving. Ask me about it later." "Where are we going?" "Padstow, for fish and chips." They continued in silence until Jeff pulled into a parking space. He jumped from the cab and walked around and opened the passenger door. "Out you get. We've arrived." Helen looked at the shop front. "I thought you said fish and chips." "I've heard of this place. It's a restaurant run by that TV chef. It's very grand and, I imagine, very expensive. I can't go in there dressed like this. I don't even have shoes on." They came off on the beach. "Relax, it's a chip shop. His proper restaurant is across town. They know me here. Come on." He took her arm and guided her towards the shop door. As they walked in, the man behind the counter greeted Jeff. "Hi Jeff, can I expect the rest of the crowd tonight?" "Not tonight, Brian. I'm just looking for a table for two." "Sorry Jeff, the restaurant closed half an hour ago." Jeff looked around at the empty shop. "Yeah Brian, I can see you were rushed off your feet. Do you think maybe, if you get a minute, you could put some cod and chips on a plate for the lady and a chip buddy for me? I'll even do the washing up." Brian laughed. "You do the washing up? That'll be the day. Do you want any drinks with that?" "I'd like a cup of coffee, and I think the lady might prefer a hot chocolate." "Right you are, Jeff. Go and sit down and I'll bring them over." They found a table, and Jeff excused himself to go to the toilet. He returned to find the food on the table. He sat down, and when Helen looked at him, he noticed a change. Her eyes no longer looked dead. She was still far from right, but something had changed. "They think a lot of you here. Brian's a mate, a frustrated biker. Well, the waitress speaks very highly of you." "What waitress?" "The restaurant is closed." The girl who wiped the tables down. Tall girl, mid-30s, dark hair, brown eyes, nice figure, quite a pretty face. Jeff looked around the empty restaurant. "Point her out to me." "Well, I can't. She's gone now, but she said very good things about you." "Is there something wrong? You look a bit pale." "The restaurant closed half an hour ago. All the staff have gone home. Brian is alone here." "I can't help that. I know what happened. She was here, and she was dressed as a waitress. I have to say, with her looks, she could do a lot better than waiting tables in a chip shop. We spoke, and when I told her I was here with you, she smiled and said you were the nicest man she knew. It really happened. I know I'm not imagining it." "No, I'm sure you're not. It's just that your description sounded like someone I used to know, but it couldn't possibly be her." Jeff shook his head to clear it. He nodded towards her plate. "Get stuck in and tell me what you think." "Home again." Jeff looked across. Helen was fast asleep in the seat beside him. She'd said she'd enjoyed her meal but hadn't been able to finish it. Now he was driving her back to his place for some much-needed sleep. Helen obviously couldn't wait. He'd expected her to wake when he stopped in his drive and switched off the engine. Helen just moved in the seat and continued to sleep. Gently closing the door of his truck, Jeff walked up and opened his front door before returning for Helen. He lifted her from the seat and carried her up to the guest bedroom and laid her out on the bed. He untied the rope around her waist and pulled his jeans from her legs. Easing the sweatshirt off, his gaze fell upon her body. She was really quite something, about 5 feet 4 inches tall, slim, shapely body pulled in nicely at the waist. Her skin was pale with freckles on her shoulders. If you'd asked him to describe his ideal woman, it certainly wouldn't fit the one on the bed. Someone more like his ex-wife, Jackie. So why was he getting a warm feeling in his chest as he looked at this girl who must be 10 years his junior? As she lay sleeping, her face looked angelic, even framed, as it was, by her greasy, uncombed red hair. God, you're beautiful. What fool damaged you so badly? He thought. Covering her with the duvet, he got a toweling bathrobe from the wardrobe and hung it on the door. Sweet dreams, fair princess, he whispered as he left the room. Jeff left Helen sleeping, went back out and locked up his truck, then settled down with a glass of wine. He wondered what had happened to put her into such a state. One thing he was sure of, it wasn't money. Even the quick glimpse of her clothes told him it was not cheap, if he was not mistaken. It reminded him of the Jackie used to wear. For a moment he was back there, sitting on his bed in Richmond, watching Jackie dress to go out. Jeff tried to shake the thoughts from his head. He hadn't thought about Jackie for months. Now a new woman was in his house, and the memories returned. But that was all, they were memories. There was no longing, no regrets. She had cheated him in the worst possible way, but now it was history. The cheating no longer dominated his thoughts, and he was pleased that he could remember more pleasant times. The image of Helen returned to occupy his thoughts. Once again, there was that warm feeling in his chest. Whatever the problem, it could wait until the morning. He put his jeans, sweatshirt, and her skirt in the washing machine, set it to wash and dry, and switched it on. By morning they'd be clean and dry. He took himself off to bed, where he reflected on the events of the day before picking up his book. Just after midnight, his bedroom door opened. "Oh, I'm sorry, I was just checking it wasn't a dream." Helen had put on the robe he'd left in her room. "Couldn't you sleep?" Jeff asked. "I just woke up somewhere strange and I panicked." "Did you undress me?" "Yes, but I never touched your innerwear. Your skirt is in the wash." "Oh, I see, thank you." Helen blushed, and then continued. "I don't suppose you have something I can sleep in? I don't have any clean ones." "Sorry, I haven't worn pajamas since I was a kid. I have some nice long shirts with tails in the wardrobe and t-shirts in the second drawer down." She went to the wardrobe and grabbed a shirt and went to the bathroom. Jeff heard the shower running as he settled down to sleep. Sometime later that he felt the bed move as she climbed in with him. "Jeff, would you hold me, please? I really need someone to hold me." She started to sob almost immediately. He took her in his arms and held her close as she cried. As the crying stopped, Jeff turned over and she spooned into him. "Thank God tomorrow's Sunday," Jeff thought to himself as they drifted off to sleep. Jeff woke up alone, had a shower, and made his way down to the kitchen, half expecting to be alone as normal. Instead, he found Helen searching through cupboards. She'd already made coffee and toast. "I was going to start breakfast, but I didn't know what you liked. I was just trying to find something to iron my skirt. Do you have an iron and ironing board?" Jeff went to the cupboard under the stairs and got out the required implements and took them to her. "Thank you. My skirt is so full of creases I couldn't possibly wear it." Jeff looked at her. His shirt never looked that good when he wore it. Her bare legs were long and shapely. She had her hair wrapped up in towel. In the light of day, he could see her eyes were green and that her young, girlish face was freckled. "Egg and bacon okay for you?" he asked. She nodded, and he started the cooking. As they ate in silence, Helen repeatedly looked into Jeff's eyes. She saw kindness there, but also sadness. When he topped up the coffee, he tried to get her to open up. "So do you want to tell me about what led up to last night? I don't want to burden you with my problems. You've done more than enough already. I should go. You can leave now, if that's what you want. It might be a bit difficult in only your skirt and your underwear. I'll drive you wherever you want to go." As she put the last piece of toast into her mouth, Jeff glanced at her left hand. He noticed the gold wedding band, topped off with another holding a large, sparkling diamond. "I see you are married. Do you want to call your husband and tell him where you are?" At the mention of her husband, she crying stared again. Jeff immediately knew what the problem was. He got up and stood beside her, holding her face to his waist. "So it's husband troubles. What's he done?" "I don't have a husband anymore. He's divorcing me." Jeff sat down again and took her hands in his. He waited for her to control her sobbing. "So that's what brought you to the beach last night?" "Partly, I suppose." "I don't know, Jeff. This is so unlike me. I'm normally the one other people depend on. Can you believe that? I run a team of accountants devising custom-made plans to help people pay less tax. Now here I am unable to cope with a marriage breakup. There's nothing silly about that, psychologist rated as stressful as the death of a loved one. You didn't see any warning signs? None. Douglas and I had been married for 10 years. I thought we were doing okay. We've been trying to start a family, but without success. 3 weeks ago, he told me he was in love with someone else and he moved out. But that was 3 weeks ago. What's happened since then? I saw him with her on Friday. They were going into mother care. She's pregnant. She's giving him the baby. I couldn't. I don't know what got into me. I don't suppose a man can understand how it feels for a woman to know she must be infertile. He'd left me for someone who could give him the children he wanted. So you felt worthless and unloved? I suppose so. I don't know how I felt really. Suddenly my reason for being was gone. I wasn't a whole woman. It didn't matter if I lived or died. I don't know why, but I got on a train and ended up here. Do you still feel that way? I don't know. I don't think so. She squeezed Jeff's hands. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here this morning, thank you. I am still alive, and I owe it to both of us to make the best of that. In that case, we've a busy day ahead. You need some clothes, and then you need to speak to Angie. Jeff, I lost my purse last night. I've checked my coat pockets. It's not there. It must have come out in the sea last night. Everything is in that purse. My driving license, credit cards, and all my cash. I don't have any money. Does a motorcycle mechanic make enough money to loan me some cash? What makes you think I'm a mechanic? The dealer's name is on the side of your truck. That's because I own the dealership. Don't worry about the money. Who is Angie? The short blonde girl at the party last night. She's one of the best solicitors in the West. She'll help you with the divorce. You may not want it, but you can't stop it. Angie can make sure you don't lose out. Is there anything you haven't thought of? Yes. How I'm ever going to wear that shirt again without seeing you in it. Now go up, dry your hair, pick out a clean shirt, and we'll go into Nuki to get you some clothes and shoes. Shoes? Your old ones will be floating past the silly aisles by now. Helen almost smiled as she went up to dry her hair and get dressed. He knew that Nuki wasn't the best place for clothes shopping, especially on a Sunday. Desperate problems required desperate remedies. Helen used the journey to check out, more closely, the man she'd spent the night with. His dark beard made guessing his age more difficult, but the traces of gray in his hair helped. She guessed he was about 45. His strong arms were tanned, as was his face, which told her he spent plenty of time outside. She remembered the feeling of being surrounded by those arms. How safe she felt, yet how vulnerable she'd been. What had possessed her to climb into his bed? There'd only been the thin fabric of his shirt between them. He'd been the perfect gentleman, wrapping his arm around her as she sobbed, dripping tears onto his chest. She wondered if she should feel insulted when he rolled over, away from her. What she actually felt was relief as she snuggled up to his broad back. By 2 p.m., they'd managed to kit her out with shoes and clothes enough for a few days. They sat outside a cafe drinking coffee and making plans. Jeff phoned Angie and arranged to call in on his way home. They had a light lunch, and Jeff took her on a tour of the area before going to Angie's house. All the time they were together, Helen studied him. Jeff was an attractive man. It was not just his looks and his tall, strong physique. He had the sort of self-assurance a man gets when he knows he has nothing to prove to anyone. In the shops, he had expected service and he got it. What's more, the assistants seemed pleased to serve him. Why would a man with so much going for him be alone and carrying such sadness in his eyes? They arrived at Angie's and Jeff left the girls to talk about the divorce while he and John, Angie's husband, took a couple of beers into the garden and talked bikes. After the best part of an hour, the girls joined them and a tearful Helen asked to go home. The journey back was quiet, and Jeff wondered whether he'd pushed her too hard. He decided to delve a little. How did it go with Angie? She told me the same as you did. I can't stop it, so I've got to get the best settlement I can. She mentioned that with another partner, I might want to try IVF and that a good settlement might pay for that. She helped me come to terms with things. Douglas, my husband, didn't go to that tart because she could give him children. He only found that out after he started cheating on me. She helped me see for the first time that it really wasn't my fault. Then Helen started to delve too. Jeff, who is Wellard? What? Angie said if I wanted to know you, I should ask you about Wellard. Wellard is me. It's a nickname. So how did you get such strange nickname? It was at the St. Paul's Carnival in Bristol. It's quite a spectacle and a magnet for the one community. People travel down from London for it. Trouble is this year the National Front held a rally in Bristol on the same day, and there was a bit of trouble. And you were involved in the trouble? Not involved really. There's something about me you should know. I don't go looking for trouble. Most of the time I walk away from it. But there are some things I just can't ignore. Go on. Tell me about Wellard. Okay, we were at a burger bar down by the station when a young kid came along. He couldn't have been more than 17. He was just minding his own business, going to catch a train when he was set upon by half a dozen National Front skinheads. At first they just pushed him about, but then one of the group kicked him in the balls. He went down and they all started to kick him. I don't think any of the other bikers saw it. There were 2 coppers at the station. I couldn't believe it. They just stood and watched. I couldn't stand by and see an innocent lad take a beating, so I started the bike and rode straight at them. The group dispersed, but when I got off the bike to help the lad up, they came back. The one who started the kicking pulled a knife and said, "This ain't your fight, granddad, so just go to hell." I told the kid to get between me and the bike. I could hear the rest of the lads running over to us, so I knew we wouldn't be outnumbered for long. The bloke with the knife lunged at me, so I swung at him. I had my crash helmet in my hand, and it hit him full in the face. I broke his nose, jaw, and cheekbone apparently. He was certainly out cold. The lad just squeezed my hand and ran off into the station. And the police did nothing all this time? Oh yeah, when it was all over and the guy was laid out on the road, they came over and tried to arrest me. That's when Angie came to the rescue. She gave them her business card, took their numbers, and told them that her client would happily answer questions at home and they could expect an official complaint about their failure to protect the public. It turned out the guy I hit only got out of prison 2 days before. He'd done a rather nasty number on his girlfriend. He was out on license, so he went from hospital straight back to the NIC. But why Wellard? Jeff smiled. That's because of what the lad said as he gripped my hand. Awesome, man. You is Wellard. For an old guy, innit? The next time I went out on a ride, as I pulled off my helmet, the whole of the bike crowd were chanting, "Wellard, Wellard, Wellard." The name just stuck. So you're not just my hero. You're everyone's knight in shining armor. I'm not even a knight in black leathers. I just try to do the right thing. Well, I'm very glad you do. Whatever led me to your beach did me a huge favor. She leaned over to put her head on his shoulder. Can I cook for you tonight? Of course, if that's what you want. As she squeezed his arm and got excited as she felt his well-defined muscles. That night, as she cooked, she kept glancing at Jeff, and every time the excitement returned. She couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so drawn to a man. She knew that she wanted him, but what would be the next step? How could she get him to make a move on her? She thought about the previous night when she'd been completely at his mercy and he'd done nothing. Perhaps he doesn't fancy me. She started on desert and made her decision. It was time to take her life back, and if that meant making herself vulnerable again, then that was a chance she was prepared to take. For the first time in 2 years, Jeff ate a meal at home that he hadn't cooked himself. He sat at the table while Helen waited on him. He couldn't keep his eyes off her as she moved about the kitchen and waited table for him. He tried not to let her see him looking at her, but the thought of her lying in bed next to him last night excited him. He admired her trim waist. He remembered the sight of her lying on the bed. He asked himself what fool walks out on such a charming, beautiful young woman. When they'd finished eating, she made him coffee. As she placed the cup on the table, she turned and kissed his lips. Jeff responded immediately, putting his arm around her waist and pulling her onto his lap. They enjoyed a passionate kiss, then another and another. Helen pulled away to get her breath back. Well, that answers one question. You're straight. Of course. Who said I was not? No one. I keep getting told what a lovely man you are. Yet there is no woman in your life. I just wondered, that's all. So are you happy now you know? I'm not sure. You had me at your mercy last night, but you didn't even try to seduce me. I suppose you just don't find me attractive. Helen looked into his eyes, willing him to say it wasn't true. She longed for him to take her in his arms. The way he kissed her indicated there was something there. She desperately wanted to feel loved, but more than that, she wanted to be loved by him. She waited, with bated breath, for his reply. If I'd taken advantage of you last night, I'd have lost your respect and deserved to lose it. I turned away from you so that you didn't get to feel what was happening to me. As for not finding you attractive, I think I've just shown that I do. Her heart beat faster as she listened to his reply. She wanted him. This much she knew. But could she really wait for him to make the first move? She loved him for being a gentleman, but would that also stop him from making a move on her? Her mind was made up. It was now or never. I'm glad. It makes the next part so much easier. You've been really good to me, and I don't like to ask for another favor, but I'm going to. Would you make love to me, please? She looked down and her long red hair fell across her face. Jeff could hardly believe his ears. This beautiful young woman was asking him to make love to her. It had been the best part of 2 years since he'd had sex with anyone, and he wasn't even sure the last time was real. He thought about it for a moment, and it became clear. She'd come to her senses, and now she was grateful to him for saving her. He struggled to find a response. His face started to redden as he spoke. "Helen, I really am very flattered that a lovely young woman should make me such an offer, but making love is very important to me. I don't want to do it with someone because they feel they are obliged or grateful to me. It has to be because I care for that someone, and she really cares for me." Helen was silent for a moment. "I should feel insulted, but I don't. I'm not offering my body as a thank you, though heaven knows I should. I asked you to make love to me because you are quite the most wonderful man I've ever met. My head may be in a mess right now, but this isn't gratitude, and I know I want you. If you didn't care for me, you would have given me over to the police or some hospital by now, so I'll ask you again. Please, Jeff, please, take me upstairs and make love to me." She took his hand. She got up. Jeff got up also, and without letting go of her hand, led her upstairs to his bedroom. They stood together beside the bed. Jeff turned her to face him, lifted her chin, and kissed her. She looked deep into his eyes. "I've never kissed a man with a beard before. I thought it would prickle, but it feels soft and tickles my nose a little." She giggled. Jeff put his arms around her and pulled her to him. She needed to be touched by his gentle hands. Her breathing becoming labored as their kissing intensified. Jeff's body left him in no doubt how he felt about her. They made love. "If I can stay here, you might not have to wait long," said Helen. She climbed off of him and lay on her side, pulling herself close to him. Jeff put his arm around her. "I could lie like this forever. Can I stay, Jeff?" "You can stay here as long as you want." As he kissed her, he said, "I think I should take a shower," he said as he started to get up from the bed. "Is there room for two?" They showered together. After that, they returned to bed, snuggled up together, and drifted off to sleep. Helen woke and was looking at Jeff with love in her eyes. Jeff was woken in a way he'd never experienced. "Ooh, goody, you're awake. I thought I was going to have to start the party on my own. Wow, you were right, it was better." She leaned forward and placed her elbows either side of his head as she kissed him. "You were so good for me. I don't deserve to be treated the way you treat me. You think it's all one-sided? You've just given me the best night of my life, and you think you should be grateful? Helen, you are a beautiful young woman who has been treated badly. You deserve all I can give you and more." Kissing him again, she climbed off. Jeff looked at the clock and realized, for the first time since he'd bought the business, he would be late for work. That thought should have instilled a sense of urgency, but it didn't. He wanted to enjoy his time with her. Over breakfast, they discussed their plans for the day. Jeff had to go to work, but Helen had plans to visit the bank to get enough money to pay Jeff back. That night, when Jeff got home, he found her distressed. The bank had refused her access to her accounts without proper identification. Everything that identified her had been in the purse she had lost. Jeff told her it was no problem, but she felt the need for her independence. "I must go home, Jeff. I need to sort things out. I have a job. The company will want to know why I didn't go in today. I've canceled all my cards, but they'll only send replacements to my home address. My passport is at home. Once I've got that, I can prove who I am and get access to my own money." She saw the sadness returning to his eyes as she pressed on with what she had to say. "I'm going to ask another favor. I'd like you to buy me a train ticket to get me back to Radlett. I'll pay you back as soon as I get access to my bank accounts. The money is not important, Helen. I don't want you to go. I like having you here, and I love being here. To tell you the truth, I think I'm falling in love with you, but I must take control of my life. There is so much that needs to be done. I need to get control of my finances again. Then there are all my possessions in the house, not to mention my clothes. Douglas has already moved out, so I'm going to sell the house. You must see that, Jeff. I've got a whole new life ahead of me, a life that I hope will include you. Before I can do that, I have to wind up my old life. This is not the end, Jeff. More like the beginning, if you want it to be. You must know what I want. If getting you back means I lose you for a while, I suppose that's what I must do." That night they enjoyed each other again. Both thought it was even better than the previous night. The following morning, with a heavy heart, Jeff drove her to the station. They got to the station as the London train departed. Faced with an hour wait for the next train, Jeff and Helen found the station cafe and settled in for the wait. "Jeff, when I asked you why you helped me, you said you owed someone. I don't think it was money. So do you think you could tell what you owe to whom?" The short answer is that her name is Vanessa Richardson and I owe her my life. Nothing special, just something I can't pay back. You can't expect me to leave it at that. We've got plenty of time, so tell me the story. Are you sure you want to hear this? It's a long story, and you may not like what you hear. Just tell me, Jeff. Okay, the story starts 2 years ago. I had my own software company. You've probably heard of it, Cockburn Software Solutions, or CSS PLC. I set it up straight out of college, and it sort of took off. Everyone was buying PCs, and Windows made them easier to use. We wrote commercial software, office suites, and accounting packages. We rode the wave for a while and did very well. When we floated the company on the stock market, I did very nicely. My wife, Jackie, and I held on to 60% of the shares. Between us, and I effectively gained a partner with expertise in business. Things went well for a while, but my projections showed the demand for our software packages declining. Even Microsoft started looking to develop hardware as another revenue stream. I knew we couldn't carry on forever, so I started looking for alternative income sources. Our expertise was in software development, so I looked into developing bespoke software for business users. I also set up a department to develop digital TV boxes. My partner, Simon, opposed all of this, seeing it as a drain on resources, but with 60% of the shares, my wife Jackie and I always carried the day. That's when the problems started. I traveled around the country drumming up trade to enable us to continue to expand. I was away from home for about 2 days a week, but brought in several contracts for bespoke software. I should have seen what was happening, but I didn't. I was completely focused on keeping the company moving forward. I could have sold up there and then. I'd have come out a very wealthy man, but people depended on me, and I wanted something to pass on to my son. The upshot was that I didn't realize that I wasn't giving my family the attention they deserved. Then my most successful deal happened. I landed a contract to develop the firmware for digital TV set-top boxes. It was the start, our future. I was high as a kite as I drove home. I couldn't wait to tell everyone about the deal. All the way home, I was making plans. I saw that I had neglected Jackie, and I was going to start making up for that. I thought we'd start with a holiday, just the 3 of us, anywhere in the world. I'd let them choose. I knew whatever they wanted, I could afford it. When I got home, I was a little surprised to find Simon's car in the drive. What the heck, I thought. I can share the good news with him as well. There was something odd about the way they all sat there on the sofa. Simon, Jackie, and my 17-year-old son, Ian, all sitting there side by side waiting for me. I expected Jackie to get up and welcome me home, but she just sat there. I dropped my bag, clapped my hands, and with a big grin told them the news. I've done it. I've pulled it off. We're going to be part of the biggest revolution since the invention of TV. Probably 20 million set-top boxes for digital TV, and guess who has got the contract to develop the firmware? No one moved. No one spoke. Don't you understand, this is worth millions? And that's without the upgrades that are bound to be required at a later date. Sit down, Jeff. The first thing anyone said, and it came from Simon. I sat down in the chair and looked at them. What's going on, C? You should be overjoyed. This deal secures the company's future. It's not going to happen, Jeff. We've shut down the development section and laid off the staff. The company can't afford it, so we're going to stick to what we know. What do you mean, you've shut it down? On whose authority? It may have escaped your notice, but I'm the majority shareholder. Jackie and I have a controlling interest. I'm the CEO, damn it. I noticed a small movement. Jackie's hand slipped from under her legs and rested on top of Simon's. There was that little squeeze, the kind of thing couples do when they are supporting each other. That's what I'm here to talk to you about. We had an emergency shareholders meeting yesterday and voted you off the board. The company can't afford all your flights of fancy. We are a good, profitable company, and we'd be a darn sight more profitable if we didn't have to finance all of your pet projects. And this has nothing to do with you screwing my wife? It was just a guess, but that hand movement told me there was more than business going on. No, it doesn't. That's a completely separate issue. This is strictly business. Of course, I'm grateful to Jackie for her support. I am sorry, Jeff. Jackie spoke for the first time. He's right. Your spending was out of control. We owed it to everyone to stop you before you ruined the company. Oh really, Jackie? And whose bed were you in when he told you that, Was it my bed, or did you go to his place? She looked at the floor and passed across an envelope. I opened it to find a solicitor's letter telling me that my dear wife had filed a petition for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. I won't take you to the cleaners, Jeff. You've been a good husband, but it isn't working anymore. I hope we can still be friends. Friends? You steal my company. You sleep with the enemy, and you expect to remain friends? Did you ever know me at all? I hope when you've calmed down, you'll change your mind. We still have our son to think of. We should try to get on. I'll be leaving with C tonight. Perhaps you'll think it over when we're gone. I found it hard to believe what was happening. Half an hour before I was on top of the world. Now that world was falling apart. I was still reeling from the shock when I realized my 17-year-old son was sitting there and so far hadn't said a word. I knew he was there for a reason, so what else was to come? So, Ian, what's your part in all this? I asked. I can't believe you're sitting there and have nothing to say. I'm going to live with Mom and C. I see, so he's taken my company, my wife, and now my son, is that it? Well, what do you expect, Dad? Everyone knows you are loaded, but what advantage did I ever see? You made me go to the local comprehensive when you could easily afford school fees. It was the local comprehensive that made me what I am. Nobody owes you a living, son. That school didn't do too bad a job. You managed to win a scholarship for the public school 6th form. No, I didn't, Dad. C paid the fees because you wouldn't. He knows it's the easy route into the top universities. So you're prepared to sell me out for 2 years' school fees? And a new Mini. I put my hand to my forehead. God, where did I go wrong with you? Simon and Jackie got up. Simon turned to me. Jeff, I know this is a lot to take in. I think we should leave you alone for a while. He offered me his right hand, which was his mistake. Perhaps he'd forgotten I was left-handed. Strictly business, Jeff. Nothing personal. I gripped his right hand in mine, then smashed my left into his face, knocking him to the floor. Blood was running from his nose. You've stolen my company and my family. Of course it's personal. Now get up and get out of my house. I looked at Jackie. Are you planning on marrying him? Yes, as soon as the divorce is final. Well, just remember, Jackie, when a man marries his mistress, it creates a vacancy. Just what is that supposed to mean? I'm sure you'll figure it out. Maybe C here will help you. Jackie helped him to his feet and held on to him as they walked out the door. Ian followed without a word. As I closed the door behind them, the only thing I could feel was empty. Since leaving university, there were only 2 things in my life: my wife and my company. Later, of course, came my son, and he also formed a prominent part. In less than an hour, it had all been taken away. On TV, people in my position reach for a bottle. I've never understood that. I drink when I'm having a good time. I certainly wasn't doing that. I sat in the chair trying to decide what to do, but no answers came. I got up and walked around the house. I used to love that house. What's not to love about it? A large Regency house overlooking Richmond Park. Of course I loved it, and so, I thought, did Jackie. Now it was just an empty shell. All the happiness I'd known there was gone. I don't know how long I paced around the house trying to find something to be happy about. It got dark, it got light again, but it meant nothing. I could hear the telephone ringing somewhere in the distance. I tried to think of the last time I was happy without Jackie. I remembered the holidays with Mom and Dad in the caravan down in Cornwall. Both Mom and Dad were dead, but the feeling of happiness I associated with that caravan kept pulling at me. I knew I had to go there. I just walked out of the house. There I was on the beach. The same beach I'd played on so happily as a child. The same beach where I met you. I didn't know why I was there. Of course, it didn't make me happy. Instead, it made me miss Mom and Dad all over again, reminding me of how alone I was. The tide was going out and I walked towards the ocean. The waves crashed against me as I strode into the surf. It seemed right to end my empty life in a place for which I only had happy memories. I walked out further and suddenly she was there, standing in the sea in front of me. She stood about 5 feet 10 inches tall. Her long dark hair hung down her back. She wore a white one-piece swimsuit. She looked at me and spoke. This is not the way, Jeff. Turn around and let's go back. Why? What's the point? There's no reason to go back. There is always a reason to live. There are things you have to do, people you have to meet. What are you talking about, and how do you know my name? I'm talking about you. It's not your time. If you go further, I will have to save you. Turn around and come with me. She offered me her hand. Come with me, Jeff. Who are you? Do I know you? My name is Vanessa, and no, you don't know me, but I know all about you. Please come with me. I took her hand and turned around to follow her. She walked elegantly out of the waves. I tried to guess her age and put her at about 35. She led me up the beach and into the dunes beyond. We came across a house in the dunes. It was of an unusual construction, being made completely of wood with a veranda that looked out to sea. Almost an old colonial bungalow in sunny Cornwall. She led me up to the door and took me inside. She let go of my hand and left me in the hallway. A few minutes later, she appeared with a towel drying her hair. The bathroom is through there. Why don't you go and have a shower? I moved off in the direction she indicated and did find a bathroom. I was still in a daze and moving very slowly. In what seemed no time at all, she was there beside me, helping me out of my clothes. She turned on the shower and waited for me. I stood naked before her as she opened the shower door. I just stood under the spraying water, not moving at all. When she stepped out of the swimsuit and got in the shower with me, I should have been surprised. Looking back, I should also have been excited. She was a hell of a beautiful woman. I actually felt nothing. In the words of the song, I had become comfortably numb. She pulled my head down to her shoulder as she washed my hair and hugged me as she washed my back. You're in shock, but don't worry. I can fix you. You look like you haven't slept in days, she said as she led me to the bedroom. We'll deal with that first. Still naked, she took me to a bedroom and put me to bed. I woke gently. It was dark outside. Jackie's arm wrapped around me. That's when I realized it had all been a terrible dream. I moved away and started to turn over. Oh, Jackie, I just had the most awful dream. I dreamed you'd left me and you and Ian had gone to live with Simon. I turned towards her and ran my hand up her body, her neck, and then her face. Something was wrong. I reached for the bedside lamp, but it wasn't there. I started to panic. What's going on, Jack? Where are we? The light came on. I looked into her eyes and everything came flooding back. Oh God, it wasn't a dream, was it? Vanessa took my chin in her hand and kissed me. No, Jeff, it wasn't a dream. It all happened, but it doesn't have to be as bad as you think. Look at me, Jeff. Don't you like what you see? Yes, you're very beautiful and any man would feel privileged to wake up with you. But you are not the woman I'm in love with. Are you still in love with her? I don't know anymore. She obviously doesn't love me. Don't be too hard on her or yourself, Jeff. You must know why he seduced her. The question is, do you want her back? I don't think I do. She chose Simon over me. I'd always be thinking I was second best as far as she was concerned. She kissed me. Never, ever think of yourself as second best, Jeff. Now are you going to use this weapon, or do I have to wait another day? What do you mean another day? It's 2 a.m. You've been sleeping for 30 hours straight. I'm a normal woman with a normal woman's needs. It's been a long time for me, and when I'm sharing a bed with a hot man, I do get a bit excited. Vanessa put her arms around me and pulled me closer. She locked her lips on mine, and her tongue started to dance with mine. I pulled away from her. I'm sorry, Vanessa. Can we take this a little slower? I'm not sure I can handle all this yet. She smiled at me and kissed my forehead. So that's not a no then? It's a not now, that's all. I feel the need to go to the bathroom right now. When I returned to bed, Vanessa was either asleep or pretending to be. I got back into bed and spooned into her. I slept fitfully and woke about 7 a.m. to the smell of coffee brewing. I sat up in bed. The door was open and down the passage. I could see Vanessa occasionally passing the end of the passage. She wore a short silk robe tied around her waist. She came back to the bedroom with 2 cups of coffee. Jeff hesitated. Just how much should he tell her? He had no idea what effect it might have on their relationship if he told her exactly what had happened with Vanessa. His mind wandered as the memory of his time with Vanessa flowed back. She put his coffee down on the nightstand, and as she turned, her robe fell open. She held onto my head and kissed. Well, that was a pleasant surprise, she whispered. Your wife was a very lucky woman. She thinks she still is. She has a new lover now. I know all about it, Jeff, and I'm telling you it's her loss. How can you? I hardly know you. He climbed off and lay down beside her. She stroked his face. And that's what you do for someone you hardly know. I can only imagine what it's like for someone you really care for. Take my word for it. It's her loss. Now what do you say to breakfast, then down to the beach for a swim? Jeff felt the nudges on his arm. I said, you made love to her, didn't you? It's all right, I don't mind. It was before you met me. It was Helen bringing his mind back to the present day. Yes, I made love to her. For nearly 6 weeks, we'd go to the beach, swim, and work on our tans. We'd spend our nights making love. Sometimes we'd even do it in the middle of the day. In the evenings, we would sit and discuss things. I told her how empty I felt. I'd built up a company and made a lot of money, but to what end? I now had no family to pass it on to, and even the company that bore my name had been lost. Somehow a great success seemed like failure. Vanessa would have none of it. She would list my achievements and all the people who'd benefited from my efforts. Having such a beautiful woman wanting me to make love to her did wonders for my self-esteem. I started developing feelings for her, but she was adamant that a relationship could never be. As the days shortened, she started to tell me that she would soon have to leave. The night before we parted, we talked. She told me she had to go and didn't know when she would be back. You need to go back and reclaim your life. There are many things you still have to do. You are not a man who gives up. You had given up when you came here, but you weren't in your right mind. Now you can go back, pick up your life, and take it in a new direction. That night, we made love slowly, tenderly. She stroked my face, kissed my lips, and told me how much she would miss me. The following day, after breakfast, she donned a 2-piece black suit. I wore the clothes I'd arrived in. She drove me to the station in her white Audi Quattro. It was an amazing car. It must have been 15 years old, but was still in showroom condition. It even had that new car smell. She dropped me off at the station, and we said our goodbyes. How will I know when you're back? I asked. Look for me on the beach. If I come back, that's where I'll be." "So," said Helen, "the person you owe is Vanessa, and you owe her your life. I suppose indirectly I owe her mine as well." "Yes, I suppose you could look at it that way. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been on that beach. If I hadn't been there myself, I wouldn't have recognized the look in your eyes. And you couldn't let me do it because you owed it to Vanessa." "That's not completely true. I could never have let you do it. I know things are never that bad. I had to make you see that." "So what happened when you went back, and why did you never find Vanessa?" This is where the story starts to get weird, and I realized something was amiss on the train journey home. I bought a newspaper on the train. I'd been away from everything for 6 weeks. No radio, no TV, no newspapers. I thought I'd catch up on what was happening in the world. I was surprised to find some of the stories that were breaking on the day my world fell apart were still in the news. According to the newspaper, only 10 days had elapsed since my world fell apart. Knowing it couldn't be true, I strode through the train looking for the newspaper seller. How dare he sell me a paper that must have been 5 weeks old? When I tackled him about it, he looked at me as if I was mad. He told me that it was the current issue. He pointed at the date. "See, that's today's date," he said. I told him it couldn't be. That date was 5 weeks ago. "Tell you what, mate, why don't you look at the date on your ticket?" I looked at the ticket, and it showed the same date as the newspaper. I went back to my seat totally embarrassed and mystified. When the conductor came through checking tickets, I asked him what the date was. He pointed to the date on my ticket and told me that was the correct date. I tried to accept it and carried on with the crossword. I got home by mid-afternoon and found the message light on my answering machine flashing rapidly at me. The first few messages were nothing at all, just people who couldn't think what to say to a machine. The first message of any significance came from my secretary. She asked me to call her and even left her home number. A couple more empty messages and then a voice I recognized. "Jeff, are you there? Please pick up, I need to talk to you." My own beloved wife sounded worried. After a few more empty messages, then one from my solicitor. "Jeff, Jackie has been to see me. I think we need to talk. Call me as soon as you get this." A few messages later, it was my secretary again. "Mr. Cockburn, please call me, I need to know you are all right. You've got my number. Anytime, day or night, just call me." I'd forgotten all about Janet. I've never met a more dedicated secretary, and now I'd left her in a state of confusion. I made a mental note to call her after I'd called the solicitor. A few more empty messages, then she was back again. "Jeff, just pick up this phone and talk to me. I didn't mean it to be like this. Please talk to me." Then there was the bank, desperately needing to talk to me. A few more blank messages, and there she was again. "Jeff, where are you? I still love you. I need to know you are safe. I dropped by the house today. You weren't there, and the bed hasn't been slept in. Please, when you get this, call me. I've been so worried." "Still loves me," she said, "just not enough to stay out of Simon's bed. Not enough to support me in the company." That was one call I wouldn't be answering. I called my solicitor. Stuart McKinsey had represented my company from the beginning. He was a man I trusted both in business and as a friend. I wasn't surprised that Jackie would have gone to him for advice, but my guess is the Stuart sent her away. He sounded relieved when I got through to him. "Jeff, it's good to hear your voice. How are you?" "I am fine, Stuart. I've been away for a few days to get my head straight, but I'm fine." "What's the problem?" "Jackie came in a few days ago with a chap called Hamilton. They said that you were no longer CEO and wanted access to all company files. I told them that until I had something from you to that effect, or a set of approved minutes of the shareholders' meeting, then I needed your approval to show them anything." "Is all this true, Jeff? Have you really been voted off, and are you and Jackie really getting a divorce?" "I'm sorry to say it's all true. Well, I've been a naughty boy. When I couldn't get hold of you, and after what they told me, I processed an order freezing all your bank accounts. I need you to drop by my office and sign the paperwork. That Hamilton bloke claims you gave him a first refusal on your company shares at the same price he bought in at. I told him that didn't sound like you, and that he would need it in writing. Are you intending to sell?" "Do you know, Stuart, I rather think I am. But if he wants them, he'll have to pay top dollar for them. I'll drop by tomorrow and we'll talk then." I said my goodbyes and hung up. Next, I called Janet. The switchboard operator put me straight through, and the relief was evident in her voice. "Oh, Mr. Cockburn, thank God you are all right. I've been so worried about you." "I'm fine, Janet. Really, I am. I didn't know what to do, sir. I found out what they had done to you, and I wanted to leave straight away, but I have a family and we need my salary." "Don't worry, Janet. You did the right thing. If I needed a secretary, you'd be the first person I'd call. Mr. Hamilton has taken over your office now, sir. I'm supposed to work for him. They made me box up all of your personal items, and I didn't know what to do with them. Just put them in the rubbish, Janet. There's nothing that I want from that office. Are you sure, sir? What about the family photos? Don't you want them? Put it all in the rubbish, Janet. That's where it belongs. The rumors were true then, sir? If they concern Mr. Hamilton and my wife, then yes, they were true. I'm so sorry, sir. I don't know how they could do that to you. I don't think I can stay here. I'll have to find another job. Don't do anything hasty, Janet. If you need a reference, I'll tell them you were the best secretary I ever had. Oh, sir, I'm going to miss you so much. I could hear her crying at the other end of the phone. Janet, would you like to have lunch with me tomorrow? I can pick you up, we'll have lunch, and then I can hand over my car to you. I'd love to have lunch with you, sir, but you don't have to worry about the car. They told me you were keeping that. I don't want it, Janet, but I really want to say a proper goodbye to you. So I'll meet you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Right, you are, sir. I'll look forward to it. Janet had been a good secretary for me, and her loyalty was always total. No matter how many times I told her to, she never used my first name. I was always Mr. Cockburner, sir. I rang around a few of my contacts and got 3 possible openings for her. Then I rang the bank and said I would be in the following afternoon to sort out any problems. For the first night since it all blew up, I slept in my own bed. To my surprise, I slept well. The following morning, I went to see Stuart McKinsey. I signed the papers for the freezing order so that he was in the clear and got him to lift it. He recommended a divorce lawyer who would protect my assets. He was under no illusions that he would keep the company business with Simon in charge, so he was working completely for me. We came up with a plan, and he agreed to handle everything for me. Lunch with Janet was a bit of a tearful affair. I gave her details of the jobs I'd found and told her to call to arrange interviews. When we got back to the office, I gave her a huge bouquet, and the tears started again. I locked the car and gave her the keys, then set off to the bank. Jackie and I had separate accounts with a joint account for household and general expenses. I transferred half of the money in the joint account to my own personal and surrendered my card for the joint account. I walked into the charity furniture shop and arranged for them to come to the house to pick up the furniture. From there, it was on to the estate agent to list the house. Then I got a taxi home. The light was flashing on the answering machine when I got home. I guessed who it would be. I pressed play. Jeff, are you there? Speak to me, goddammit. I know you're back, even if I did have to find out from your secretary. Can you guess how it feels having that bitch look down her nose at me while she tells me that my husband is alright? I swear she's got the hots for you. Please, Jeff, just talk to me. Over the next couple of days, I set about moving out. There was very little I wanted from the house, just my desk, chair, and my mom's old dresser. Everything else was stuff that Jackie bought. I put my stuff into storage, packed my clothes in suitcases, and waited for the locksmith and the guys from the charity shop. When they came to pick up the furniture, they couldn't believe the quality of the stuff I was giving them. A lot of the stuff we pick up is really only fit for the tip, but this will fetch a good price. Thank you, sir. The driver told me. You should be thanking my wife. She's the reason it's all got to go. Ah, I see. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Still, it's an ill wind that blows no one any good, eh? I shook his hand and watched him drive off with all the trappings of my old life. I called a taxi to take me to a hotel. We stopped off at the estate agent's to drop off the new keys to the house. I bought myself a mobile phone and the following day boarded a train to my new life. I had no idea what that life would be, but it knew I would live it in Cornwall, somewhere near a certain beach. Yes, I intended to search for Vanessa. In case my old colleagues tried to get in touch, I'd paid for a short period of call diversion from the landline in the house. I didn't expect to get many calls. Shortly after boarding the train, the ringing phone took me by surprise. I answered the call and heard a familiar voice. Jeff? Jeff? Are you there? Jackie sounded almost hysterical. Jeff, if you're there, please talk to me. I called at our house today to see you, but my keys don't fit and the house looks empty. I'm hoping you transferred the number to wherever you're living now. Where are you, Jeff? I need to talk to you. I think I've made the biggest mistake of my life. There. I've said it. Now please talk to me. I thought about it for a moment. Would talking to her bring any benefit? She decided our marriage was over, and she had cheated me in the boardroom. Now it seemed she'd had a change of heart. Could she possibly undo the damage she had done? No, of course she couldn't. Without saying a word, I disconnected the call and switched off the phone. Within a few days, I'd found a furnished flat in Newquay. Stuart McKinsey called me to say that he'd found a broker for me. In line with my instructions, a small amount of my shares in the company would be sold on the open market. If Hamilton wanted them, he'd have to pay the market price. The trick of selling a large amount of shares is to do it a little bit at a time. Put too many on the market and the price drops. Sell too slowly, and the news of an event like the departure of the CEO leaks out and the price drops anyway. I'd instructed the broker to offload all of my shares at the best price possible. Stuart did tell me that Simon had been in touch with him again to make me an offer for the shares. He told him that he would pass the message on. Within a week of arriving in Newquay, I found the beach where I'd met Vanessa. I spent some time on the beach, but met no one I recognized. I went up into the dunes to find the house, but had no success. I returned every day until the day I came upon a concrete base. I was working out what it was when an old boy walking his dog came up to me. "You lost or something, mate?" "Not really, just looking for something, and I was sure it was right here." "What is it you're looking for then?" "A large, single-story wooden house." "You mean the old Richardson house?" "Well, looks like you found it. It used to stand right here." "What do you mean used to be? What happened to it? And when?" "The council cleared the site about a year ago. The kids used to play in it. One day it caught fire. The fire brigade put it out, but the council decided the ruin was a danger to the public and tore it down." "No, it can't be. I'm talking about a house where a young woman lived. She was about 35, about the same height as you, hourglass figure, strikingly beautiful." "Oh, that's her all right. She and her husband lived here. Used to spend most of their days out there on the beach they did. It did my heart good just to look at her. Actually, she used to get more than my heart going, if you know what I mean. It was a sad day, and no mistake, when he went in the water." "When was this, and what happened?" "Who would it be, about 12 years ago now. He was one of them blokes who set up a .com company. He got out at the right time. Sold the business onto someone else and made $1 million in the process. That's why they moved down here and built the house. Love's young dream they was. Everybody said so. She used to be an Olympic swimmer. She loved to be in the water. He was the problem, he couldn't stop. He had to make more money, so he played the stock market. He lost the lot. Every penny. Well, he couldn't live with it, could he? One day while she went shopping, he took himself out to the beach and just walked out into the water. According to the rumor, she came home, found what he'd done, and swam out to sea looking for him. His body washed up down at St. Ives. They never found her." "But that can't be. I was in that house only a week ago. I was talking to her." "Not this house, you weren't, son. You must have the wrong beach, because this is the only house there's ever been on this one." I found myself with another mystery. First 6 weeks turns into 10 days. Now I find that the house I was living in only a week ago was demolished the year before. I had to investigate further, so I took myself off to the offices of the local newspaper. I told them I was writing a book about the couple and asked if I could look through their archive. It took me less than an hour to get lucky. I found the first story about finding John Richardson's body. His wife Vanessa was not available for comment. The following week, they carried the story of Vanessa's disappearance. There was a photograph of her. It was my Vanessa, looking exactly as she had when she came out of the sea to stop me. I knew then she wasn't coming back. At least not in any way that would allow us to have a relationship. I persuaded them to let me have a copy of the photograph. I went back to my flat and looked at my bank and credit card statements, looking for something to tell me where I'd been for those 10 days. I found nothing that gave me any idea. In the end, I gave up. Even though I knew she wasn't coming back, I still felt drawn to that beach. She'd said when she came back that's where I would find her. It was as if she wanted me to be there. I bought a house here, and when I found an ailing motorcycle dealership for sale, I indulged the passion of my youth and bought it. Since then, I've spent much of my free time on the beach. Helen squeezed his arm. "Did you ever see her again?" "No, I never did. Not until the night I met you. I thought I saw her coming out of the surf just as we were about to leave the beach. It was only for a second, and then she was gone." "Were you in love with her, Jeff?" "No, I don't think so. I liked her a lot, and she was very beautiful, but really I think I felt I owed her something. She'd given me so much in that 6 weeks or 10 days, whichever it was in reality. I'd have done anything to have been able to give something back to her." "Do you have her photo?" Jeff got out his wallet and produced the picture he'd got from the newspaper office. Helen looked at the picture and the blood drained from her face. "I've seen her, Jeff. I've seen her twice. She was the waitress in the fish and chip shop. I met her again when you took me clothes shopping. She was in the fitting rooms in one of the shops. She told me what a good man you were. Do you think she's looking after us?" "Well, if she brought you to me, I need to thank her again. Perhaps she didn't bring me to you, but she made sure you were there for me." The public address announced the imminent arrival of Helen's train. They made their way out to the platform. They kissed like a pair of teenagers. "Helen, are you really coming back?" "You bet I am. I have to get everything sorted out. I don't know how long it will take, but as soon as it's done, I'll be back." "What about you, Jeff? You're not going to disappear like Vanessa?" "No, I'll be here. I'll wait as long as it takes." He kissed her again as she got on the train. A tear came to his eye as the doors closed and the train started to move. He waved until he could see her no more, returned to his car, and drove to work. August 2nd, 2003. Jeff was in his element. He turned off the water from the hose and stood and looked at his pride and joy. He sniffed, taking in the wonderful smell of gunk. The Vincent black shadow gleamed in the sunlight. Jeff took his chamois leather and started drying the paint and chrome work. He noticed the taxi pull up. Crouching down, he picked up his tube of Solvol Autosol and started to polish the tappet covers. He heard the cab door close but didn't turn to look. He knew who it would be. He'd been told she was here. She'd been asking about him in Yuki. It was only a matter of time before she sought him out. She stopped on the other side of the bike and waited for him to get up. Jeff continued his polishing. "It's been a long time, Jeff. You're looking good." He stood up and wiped his hands with his polishing rag. He looked her up and down. The past years hadn't treated her particularly well. She was about 20 pounds heavier, but even her face looked fatter. "You're not looking so bad yourself, Jack. You don't need to flatter me. I know how I look. So what brings you to this part of the world? Was the divorce settlement not good enough? I gave you $250,000 from the house. You kept your company shares. Stuart McKinsey said you were happy with the lump sum for Ian's child support. No, it's nothing like that. As a matter of fact, you were very fair, all things considered. Look, we can't really discuss things out here. Can we go inside?" For the first time since she arrived, he noticed she was carrying a briefcase. That made him a bit curious, so he invited her into the house. Once inside, she looked around. "This is nice, Jeff. A good-sized garden I see, and you've got what, 3 bedrooms, or is it 4? Only 3 at the moment, but you didn't come all the way down here to look at my house. What is it you want?" Jeff set the coffee filter machine going and waited for her to answer. "It's you I want. I've come to ask you to come back." Jeff stopped in his tracks. His mouth fell open and his eyes widened. Jackie put her hand to her mouth and started laughing. "No, I didn't mean that. I'm not asking you to come back to me, though God knows I would if I believed it would work. I'd even beg if it would do any good, but I know you better than that. I burned my bridges with those divorce papers. It wasn't until I was without you that I realized what I really wanted. You know how the song goes. You don't miss your water till your well runs dry. You lost me as soon as I guessed you'd had Simon with you. You acted like lovers on that sofa. That was enough for me. How is Ian? I gather he's firmly hitched his team to Simon's wagon. I tried to stop him, Jeff. Really, I did. But he's an adult now. If he wants to change his name, I can't stop him. He still looks up to Simon. Give him time. He's still young. He's had 7 years. I think that's long enough. What about you? I gather it didn't work out with C? Do you remember what you said to me as we went out of the door? I do, and it came back to haunt me. When a man marries his mistress, it creates a vacancy. It only took him a year to fill that vacancy. It didn't help that I was still in love with you. You never asked me why I did it. I've asked myself several times, and I still don't know. He was just so damn persuasive. The silver tongue doesn't cut it once you're spending all your time together. Once I caught him with his trousers down, so to speak, there was only one ending. So what's happening now? Have you found someone else? There have been a couple over the last 5 years, but they don't go anywhere. You're a hard act to follow, Jeff. You were always a good husband. There was just that one year when you were running around all over the place trying to get work for the company to change direction. I was a fool letting that prick convince me that you were playing around. I never did. You were always all I wanted in a wife. I had no need for anyone else. I know that now, but it's too late, isn't it? You got that right, way too late. So this visit isn't about us. What is it about? We want you to come back to the company. We can offer you your old job back, and you'll have a free hand. You can take the company in whatever direction you want. You keep saying we, Jack. Who is we? The board and the bank. It won't surprise you, Jeff, because you predicted it. The company is in trouble. The bank won't lend any more money unless we can put together a credible diversification plan. We've tried, but the clients don't believe we have the expertise to deliver. We need someone with credibility, Jeff. We need you. What does Simon have to say about this? He's okay with it, but it wouldn't make much difference if he wasn't. He's still only got 30%. Thanks to the divorce settlement, I've got 35%. The rest of the board and the bank support me. I've even brought a contract with me. Jeff got up and poured the coffee and brought 2 cups back to the table. He sat down and took his cup in both hands. He took a sip from his coffee and addressed Jackie. What makes you think I want to come back? I'm happy here. I have friends here, and I have no need to come back. Oh, come on, Jeff, you can't tell me that you're happy running a motorbike shop. I can see that it allows you to indulge the passion of your youth, but you can't tell me it stimulates your brain. Jackie became aware that Jeff was no longer looking at her, but over her shoulder. She turned to see a Toyota MPV pull up on the drive. A slim redhead got out. opened the back door and helped two copper-haired children get out of the car. They walked towards the front door. Jeff got up and walked towards the door. "Are you expecting visitors?" Jackie asked. "No, I'm not," he said as he opened the door. The two children came running in and grabbed hold of his legs. "Daddy, why didn't you come swimming with us today?" said the little boy. Jeff squatted down to talk to him. "Because, little man, I was expecting a visitor who came all the way from London." "Is she here now, Daddy?" asked the little girl. "Yes, darling. She is sitting over there at the table." Jeff stood up and hugged the young woman and kissed her. Jackie felt a twinge of jealousy seeing them together. "We missed you at the pool today," Helen said as she put her arm around his waist. "Are you going to introduce us?" They all walked back towards the table. As Jackie offered her hand, Jeff made the introductions. "Jackie, this is Helen. Helen, this is my ex-wife, Jackie. And these two ankle biters are Daniel and Vanessa." He bent down to the children. "This is the lady Daddy was married to before he met Mummy." Helen shook Jackie's hand, then took her in a fond embrace. "It's nice to meet you. I owe you so much." Jackie looked puzzled. "What can you possibly owe me? Isn't it obvious?" "Him. These two. My life, basically. If it wasn't for you, none of this would have happened." "Well, Helen, if you're trying to make me feel like a stupid bitch, you're doing a hell of a good job. I didn't see a wedding ring." "Well, you know how it is, Jackie. Once bitten, twice shy." "Jeff, were you expecting me today?" Jackie asked. "Soon after you booked your taxi last night, someone rang to say you'd be coming here. Like I said, I have friends here. Real friends, people who care about me. Now why don't you tell me the whole story?" "So what is it that you don't already know?" "I want to know the real reason you came." "I told you I want you to come back." "Well, you can't have him back, he's mine now." Helen called out from the laundry room. "The company is in trouble, Jeff. What I didn't tell you is that we've been made an offer. The thing is, it's an all-or-nothing deal. I only own 35% of the shares. C still has 30%, but the other 35% belongs to 4 other shareholders. They all want to sell. Even C is considering it. The bank wants us to sell so that we can settle our overdraft. I really did come to ask you to come back. If you come back, I can swing the others behind me, and the bank would give us more time. Sell, Jack. Just let it go. Get the best deal you can." "I don't want to. That company is my last link with our old life, Jeff. I don't want to let it go." "Take the offer, Jack. Let the past go. They won't take on our debts. I'll be left with less than 100,000 once we've settled with the bank. C will be left with nothing. He remortgaged his house to buy some of your shares, then lost them to me in the divorce settlement. Please, Jeff, come back and help us to rebuild the company. You've done it before, and if we let you do it your way, we wouldn't be in this mess. You can't be happy being a motorcycle dealer. You're capable of so much more. Take the offer, Jack. I'm happy here. I like doing what I do. Yes, I am capable of more than selling motorbikes. That's why I have my finger in so many other pies. Just go home, take the money, and move on." Helen came back into the room. "Jackie, I'm about to start lunch. Would you like to join us? I'm sure Jeff would be happy to drive you back to town later." Jackie looked at Jeff and realized she was wasting her time. "No, thank you very much. I must be going. Thank you for your time, Jeff." She got out her phone and called for a taxi. No sooner had Jackie left the house than Helen walked up to Jeff, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him. "You are a very naughty man, Jeff Cockburn. She doesn't know, does she? And you're not going to tell her, are you?" "Right on both counts," Jeff said as a broad grin spread across his face. "The last time I found something that amusing was when my ex-husband's baby came out brown. Of course, you getting me pregnant made it all the more enjoyable. Like you said, I'm a very naughty man." September 29th, 2003. As they filed into the lunchroom, some of the employees of Cockburn Software Solutions thought there was something familiar about the guy with the beard sitting at the back of the room. However, the main focus of their attention was the slim, shapely redhead standing beside him. She looked elegantly sexy in her two-piece suit. Helen waited for them all to assemble and closed the door before she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, you will all be aware that CSS has been experiencing some financial difficulties, and the future has been somewhat uncertain. I'm pleased to tell you that as of 9 a.m. that uncertainty has been removed. This company has been taken over by Wellard Data Services." She paused while the whisper went around the room. Wellard is a company built up over the last 6 years to address the need for online data storage foreseen by our founder. We own 2 large server farms, one in Reading and one in Edinburgh. Much of our business comes from companies' desires to disaster-proof their data. We've acquired CSS so we can add value to what we do by providing online bespoke programs. This is not going to yield profits immediately, so we need to release assets. tied up in this company. To this end, we are selling this building and relocating to Truro. No way, shouted a voice from the crowd in front of her. Excuse me, sir, you are? Ian Hamilton, project manager, and there is no way you're moving us to the back of Beyond. I'll take it to the board if I have to. Jeff stood up. What code do you write, Mr. Hamilton? Ian thought he recognized the voice, and the man with the beard looked familiar. I don't write code. I'm a project manager. Well, Mr. Hamilton, all our project managers also write code, so I'm afraid the invitation to move down to Truro with us will not be open to you. As for taking it to the board, you just have. I own Wellard and now I own CSS again. I am the board, Mr. Hamilton. What I say goes, and I say we move to Truro. We will get enough from the sale of the London properties to pay the salary bill until we develop new products. If you pop along to Human Resources at the end of this meeting, they will tell you all about the statutory severance package. Ian knew now who he was dealing with and got up and left. Jeff continued, if anyone else feels the same way as my son, they are welcome to join him. We hope to take most of you with us, but that will be your decision. We will offer a generous relocation package. As Ms. McAllister has already mentioned, this building will be sold. So will the 2 flats owned by the company. These are currently occupied by young Mr. Hamilton and a young lady providing personal services for Mr. Simon Hamilton. We will be bringing in our own management team. You've already met Ms. McAllister, who is the chief accountant. Those of you who've been with the company for 7 years or more may recognize the people who join us. There are a number of people who served CSS well in the past, and I've managed to persuade many of them to return. Mr. Simon Hamilton and Mr. Cockburn no longer have a role in the company. I will be meeting with all heads of department this afternoon to outline the way forward. If you have any more questions, Ms. McAllister will be pleased to answer them. Thank you. Jeff left the room and made his way to what had once been his office, where he found Simon Hamilton. Good morning, Simon. Packing up your personal belongings? Well, I wasn't, but I suppose if you want this office, I'll move. I like the beard, Jeff. If you hadn't spoken, I'd never have known it was you. Yes, see, I would like you to vacate the office. In fact, I'd like you to vacate the premises. There was a knock at the door and Janet, Jeff's old secretary, passed him a box for Simon's personal belongings. I really thought you'd want to keep me on. With my contract, it'll cost you too much to get rid of me. You know that I'll enforce it. Oh, see, you really should have read the sale contract. The previous owners were responsible for honoring all senior management contracts. That means you'll be suing yourself if you try to enforce it. What's the problem? You must have got 85 grand out of the sale. Yeah, and I owe more than 4 times that much on my house. I had to remortgage it in order to buy some of your shares. I shouldn't worry, see. I'm sure you get another job in a month or 2. Perhaps my son will share his redundancy pay with you. After all, you shared your name with him. You haven't fired him? I can't believe you'd be that vindictive. Didn't have to. He fired himself. Said there was no way he was going to Truro. Simon busied himself collecting up his personal possessions and putting them in the box while Jeff waited. Eventually, he picked up the box and moved towards the door. See, you do realize this is all strictly business, nothing personal. Simon stopped and thought about shaking Jeff's offered right hand. He remembered the broken nose he got the last time he shook it, turned around and left. Jeff sat at his old desk. He stretched out his arms and ran his hands over the leather top. Janet knocked on the door and entered the office. I just wanted to say, sir, it's so good to see you back where you belong. Thank you, Janet. It's good to have you back. I'll bet your last employer was sad to see you go. Well, they did offer a generous increase, sir, but I knew who I wanted to work for. I'll be very glad to have you with us down in Truro. Are you sure it's okay with your husband? Oh yes, sir. We'd always planned to retire to Cornwall. Now we're empty nesters, there's nothing to keep us here, and he's already been offered a job. Janet, don't you think you've known me long enough to call me Jeff? Oh, I couldn't do that, Mr. Cockburn. It wouldn't be right. Is there anything I can get you, sir? Not right now, Janet. Why don't you take an early lunch, and I'll see you back here at 2 p.m. Yes, sir, thank you. She'd been gone only a few moments before she came back in. There is a Ms. McAllister to see you, sir. Send her in, Janet, and then go to lunch. Yes, sir. Helen walked in smiling to herself. Jackie was right about one thing. That woman's sweet on you. She's a hell of a good secretary. That's what's important to me. I suppose this makes you my boss now, doesn't it? You know I've got a fantasy about my boss, where I make a mistake and he punishes me for it. So just how does he punish you? Oh, I'd have to leave that to him, sir. Jeff stood up. I'm sorry, sir. I'll try to do better, but I have to be punished, don't I? Indeed you do, Jeff said as he slapped the other cheek. With smiling. Whatever you say, sir. You're the boss. Now, Ms. McAllister, I hope you've learned something from your mistake. Oh, I have, sir, she sighed. I've learned that I'd better make a lot more of them. And what do you think your husband would say about that? I don't have a husband, sir. My partner was too damaged by his ex-wife to ever try again. The man's a fool. Jeff told her. Why don't you marry me? But what about my children, sir? Jeff flopped back into his chair and took her by the hand. I'll adopt them. He pulled her towards him. In that case, sir, the answer is yes. They both laughed at their role-playing, then shared a kiss. They were disturbed by the sound of the door opening. Standing in the doorway was a tall, elegant woman. Her long hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore a black two-piece suit. She smiled at the couple behind the desk, who both looked back at her. Vanessa, they said in unison. The woman continued to smile, then blew them a kiss and was gone. The couple looked at each other. That was her, wasn't it, Jeff? He nodded. You saw her too? She was real? I didn't dream her? If she wasn't real, we both had the same dream. I got the impression she was saying goodbye. Perhaps she thinks we don't need her anymore. Now, I'll have to be your guardian angel. Only if you'll let me be yours for the rest of our lives. It's a deal, she said, locking her lips on his. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.